Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you would mind hitting the like button, that helps to get my channel promoted. I appreciate that. I also love it if you'd leave a comment. I appreciate things like constructive criticism. I'm always interested in how you do things. Questions about the video. Those are all great things to put in the comments. So let me know what you think. For a long time I've been meaning to do an owl pendant, and that's what I'm going to do today. I've drawn some things up and picked one of the drawings, and I picked a couple of kind of yellowish tourmalines for eyes, and I think he'll come out cool, but we'll give it a try and see. Before we do that, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters, and I have found them to be an excellent group of people who are full of wisdom, and there's some truly talented artists over there. I appreciate not only their sharing their knowledge, but also creating such a nice community over there. It's a nice place. The other group of people is my YouTube subscribers, and I really appreciate them as well. We just passed 14,200, which is amazing, and I never ever thought we'd get to this point, but I appreciate it, and it's nice to hear what you guys think. I appreciate the really kind comments that I get occasionally. That keeps me going when I'm feeling tired, so thanks for that. And thank you also for the super thanks and the buy me a coffees. Those kind of things help with the costs of doing this, so I appreciate that. All right, well, let's get started on this video. This is one of my design idea books. This is the current one that I'm using. I like to sketch up my designs in advance. It helps me to kind of formulate an idea of where I'm heading rather than just going into it blindly. So it's been useful for me to do that. The newer ones, I've been putting conversion charts on the backs. This one is fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeters, which I find pretty useful sometimes. And inside it's got this grid pattern, which helps me to keep things kind of symmetrical when I'm drawing them up. You may recognize some recent projects here. And here's what I drew up for today. Let me show you the little tourmalines. I pre-made the bezels just for time's sake. If you're interested in seeing how to do just a basic bezel, I'll put a link up here for you. These are going to be, I was trying out some different styles. I was going to use maybe some amber cabs that were a little bit bigger, but he started to get a little bit too big. So when I went down here, I was thinking about using a stone for his body, but I decided against that. And then I decided to just add some detail with some overlapping sheet, I think. So those are going to be his eyes. I'm going to have him sitting on a little branch like that. And mostly we're going to be using pieces of sheet layered to create this effect. So I'm going to have a base piece that's kind of the shape from up here at the top of his eyes down to where the branch is, and that's going to be shaped like his body. And then on top of that, I think I'm going to lay a piece of 22 gauge sheet. The bottom piece will be 18, so it's thick. 22, I'm going to cut out some details like this and solder it down on top of that 18. Then I'll add these eyes. The disc's made out of 22 as well. And then I'll add the bezels on top of those. And I'll probably add these wings then. And I'll have to cut out a separate piece to go below the stick that I'm going to make out of 14 gauge square wire, which I don't remember the millimeter measurement on that. 18 gauge sheet is 1.02 millimeters. 22 gauge sheet is 0.66 millimeters. So this will be 18 down here, this little piece. So to start with, let me find, I cut a piece of, I did two things in advance other than the bezel. I punched out a couple of discs about that size out of 22 gauge sheet using my disc cutter. I just have a cheap one, but if you've never seen a disc cutter, it just has spaces between, like if you look from the side, it's got this slot in there. You can slide a piece of sheet in there. You put whichever size cutting die in here in the correct hole and hit it with a hammer really hard, and it knocks out a little circle. So those are handy. They make really nice ones. I don't have a really nice one. I just have kind of a cheapie, but they work okay. You just have to hit really hard with a hammer. So And I'll clean those up a little bit before I solder them down so they have a nice smooth texture. But basically his body, I kind of cut a piece of 18 out, and I'm going to use my saw to cut that out. So let's go do that. And then we'll kind of shape it with the file, and then we'll start adding some details like cutting out a piece of 22 to fit there, and maybe cutting a piece of 18 for that. Although I may wait till the end for that. So let's go over to the sawing area. Put a little blade butter on there, get things kind of lubed up. This is a number 2, I believe, on the blade. So I'm going to start right here. Alright, so we've got a basic shape. I'll clean that up with the file and get a little neatened up. Alright, so this is a little oversized still, but it's mostly right down on the body part. I think I will probably trace this, or we could do it like, let's do it like this. Let's let that dry for a second. Okay, so we can see the general shape now, and I can see that I need kind of a right here. So I'm thinking if I cut just this portion out here, I can use a saw to get those little details in there, and then we can solder it down on top of this sheet. So that I think will be our next step. Okay, so we'll go over there and saw this out. Here we are back at the sawing area. Okay, so we got kind of like that. And I think our next step will be to solder that down. So the easiest way to do this probably will be to sweat some solder onto the back of this, flip it over on top of this, and then heat the whole thing until it reaches temperature. And it may try and skate around a little bit on this, so I'm going to keep my pick handy in case I need to push it back into place, because sometimes it'll move on you. We could also position some pins or something on the ceramic block here if we wanted to. Kind of hold it in place. Then we can smooth everything out and get it all nice and neat. So I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything, and I know everybody doesn't do that, and that's fine. You should use whatever kind of solder works best for you. I do a lot of pick soldering though, and so being able to pick up a little piece of solder like that on my soldering pick makes it easier for me to be able to place solder precisely where I want it to go. It was one of those tricks that I found to really advance my abilities, so if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up here for you. I have a good video about that. All right. So theoretically there should be plenty of solder on there. Let's get this position on the other one. Like I said, one thing you can do if you don't want things to move too much is you can put pins here and there so they can't slide around too much. If I can find one more. There's another one. That looks pretty good. So it's going to be a lot harder to get the bottom piece up to the 1450 degrees it needs to be for the solder to stick to it. And so I'm going to focus most of my heat on the lower piece. The upper piece will get hot just by being in proximity. The lower piece is also a lot more massive because it's 18 gauge. I think I'm going to turn it upside down. I didn't quite get it on this side over here. So that'll allow me to heat this bigger piece a little more efficiently. It was just going to be hard to kind of position it if I couldn't see that piece. But now it should stay pretty much where I wanted it to go. Okay, I'm going to take a minute and get that all symmetrical and evened up where these two overlap like that. So I'll be right back. So I did a little bit of pre-polishing on there to get it kind of smoothed out because it's going to be hard to get in the nooks and crannies after a while. I think our next step is to solder those down. At this point it looks like a little monster. So let's sweat a little solder on these and then just position them there. Okay, got plenty. Should I put his little kind of eyebrows on next, or should I put his beak, or should I put the bezels on his eyes? I think probably let's put the bezels on next. So, and the reason I'm thinking is because once I have these soldered on and these wings that are going to cup a little bit soldered on, as well as the stick and everything, going to solder the bezels on at the end, something else may fall off and I don't want it to. So let's mount those bezels next. Put a couple of pieces of solder in each of these. I'll go ahead and file those down a little ways so I don't have to deal with that much later. So I filed those down and then I went ahead and I drilled some holes through the center of those. And I think next we need to make the eyebrow kind of things. So I want to have some width to work with, so I'm going to use 8 gauge half round and just kind of sculpt it. I think this is some 8 gauge half round. So we'll start by tapering this end. So I think in order to make this easier, need to be about that long. Add a little bit extra there. And if I file into the side right at that point like this, since the other side needs to be tapered as well. It still gives me more to hold on to then while I'm getting that started. And while I have this in here, maybe I can bend this just a little bit upwards. Just using some nylon jawed pliers here. Something like that. It's going to end up being in there. I want it to curve in a little tighter, so I'm going to have to bend it a little sharper. So I just need to duplicate that. I'll be right back. So I have these both shaped now. And I made an executive decision, and I think I'm going to solder these on last because they're going to be elevated just a little bit. At least last before I put on the little, I'm going to make some little hidden loops on the backs of these for a split chain to attach to. But before we do that, I made a little branch here. I wanted it to have a little split on this side, or one side at least. And so I'm going to solder that on next. And then I think, let's see, I'm going to need to do some wings here and the little tail that sticks below that. So I may not make you watch me make the tail because it'll just be doing what I did here with the sawing like that. But yeah, that'll be our next steps. So let's solder this on. Right now this looks like a bug-eyed monster. Hopefully that changes as we go. I think I'm actually going to make that tail next, and then we'll do the wings and solder those on there. So. Okay, so I got his tail made, and I wanted to make some of these three-toed feet, and so I think what I'll do is I'll wrap some 18 gauge around some 14 gauge, which is what I used for this, and probably just cut it in half so I can just drape it over that. But before I do that, I'll put the tail on there, so just wrap a couple more wraps on this. Oh, I already did the first one. Okay, I'm just going to solder those real quick. One of the things about soldering silver, if you have a seam like this, it's got a tightly wound spring. Like many liquids, it will just, when the solder flows, it will just wick along that entire thing. Just like that. It doesn't take very long, as long as the entire piece gets up to temperature. Okay, now let's solder this tail on. a zillion variations of owls you could probably do. I'm trying to figure out which one I was going to do on this one. I looked at a lot of clip art, and I looked at pictures of real owls, and I looked at some jewelry that was made to look like owls. So, and I picked the things I liked out of what I looked at and just sketched something up. So, like I saw this branch on one particular piece of jewelry. I liked the way it looked, so I thought that would be a cool thing to do. So I only need about from there to drape over that, and I'll file off one of these rings. It's actually 4 deep here, so I may use the saw to cut that to get it pretty neat, and then I'll just file it flat on the bottom. So let me go do that real quick. I was looking at this trying to figure out why it looks strange, and I realized I didn't put the beak on. So I need to put a beak on here. So I'm going to sweat a little solder there, and I'll just solder it down there. And I'm also going to have to sweat some solder on the backs of these so that I can solder them down. Well, I should get those feet out too, see how they look. I need to make sure I have enough room for them. It's starting to look like an owl. I like it. Maybe I should just try doing it like that and pick it in there, because I got them positioned pretty well. That way I'd run less risk of soldering that little spacer there to the little eyebrow horns or whatever you call them. So, let's cool this off, and then I'll check some solder joints. And then the last thing is I'm going to put some little rings on the back of these horns. And I think I'll let it pickle. I'm not going to set the stones in front of you. Oh, I did want to thank all of the people who've downloaded my ebook. I really appreciate it. It's if you haven't heard of that, it's a guide to my 2023 videos. It includes my original sketches for each video, final picture, a list of materials you need to make it, and kind of a subjective difficulty rating, and some notes that I made, you know, regarding some challenges I might have run into with that particular piece, or things I might do differently, you know, if I was to make it again. So yeah, stuff like that. And it's even got a link right to the video. So if you're interested, I'll put a link up there for you. Okay, I'm going to push this down into this magnesia block. Okay. The last bit was a little more challenging than I expected. Okay, so now I'm going to let this pickle. Next time you see it, I'll show you the finished product. I'm going to make a little split chain with some fine chain that I have, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so you can see I added a little chain on top of it, and I set those stones. I think the stones look pretty cool as eyes. The only thing I'm not pleased about is not being able to get in there to polish very well, so I might try the Dremel with that spot right there, and in there a little bit, and see if I can get it a little bit better. But other than that, I'm pleased with it. I think it's kind of a cool looking pendant. It's kind of what I was shooting for there. So, all right. Well, I'll take some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well that was the owl pendant with the tourmaline eyes. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. And take a moment and check out my channel page. I have 370 plus videos now, so there's almost certainly something else you'll like. Watch a few, come back and subscribe. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have a question or anything. I love that. I love to get comments like that. Don't forget to hit the video description down below. There's a lot of important links down there. There's a link to the Buy Me a Coffee site, Patreon. You can get my ebook there. There's a link to my merch store where you can get one of those nice design idea books. A link to my website. So check those things out. Come back and visit again. Take care. Happy silversmithing.